The wedding day was nothing short of a royal celebration in the vibrant village of Dabasa. The air was alive with music as the drums beat like thunder, echoing joy across every hut and hill. The aroma of spices and fresh flowers lingered in the air, while colourful fabrics, bright reds, deep blues, golden yellows, flowed like rivers, decorating every corner of the village. Children danced barefoot under the sun, elders clapped their hands in rhythm, and villagers from far and near gathered to witness what was spoken of as the grandest wedding the land had ever seen. It was the wedding of Prince Kojo, the proud and fearless warrior, the only son of the powerful chief Endoro. Kojo was admired for his strength in battle and respected for his leadership, though many whispered that his heart was as hard as stone. Standing tall with a commanding presence, he wore a robe woven from lion thread cloth, a symbol of power passed down through generations. By his side was the bride, Leona, a woman whose gentle nature touched every soul she met. She was not born into royalty, but her grace, warmth, and wisdom made her more queenly than any crown could. The daughter of the late village healer, Madame Nyara, Leona was beloved by the people for her kindness and healing hands. Her presence alone brought peace to troubled hearts. On this day, she walked down the path adorned in silk robes dyed in indigo and threaded with gold. Her neck shone with ancestral beads, and her hair was braided with care, each strand decorated with cowrie shells that clinked softly as she moved. As she entered the ceremonial circle, gasps of awe spread through the crowd. Women leaned into each other, whispering, "She is a jewel sent by the spirits." Even the elders, who rarely smiled, nodded in approval. Kojo stood waiting, his face unreadable, while Leona's soft eyes searched his for warmth. The ceremony began with blessings from the village oracle, songs from the women's guild, and chants that echoed through the hills like the voices of ancestors rejoicing. Gifts piled high, cattle, grains, woven mats, and carved treasures, offered by both families and villagers who wanted to honor the union. The dance of the firewalkers marked the height of the celebration, their feet gliding across burning embers without pain, a sign of purity and divine approval. Everyone celebrated as food was shared, horns blew, and feet stomped in the dust long into the night. But while the village celebrated under the starlit sky, something else was brewing, something no one could see. Behind the smiles and praise, behind the joy and music, a storm was quietly gathering in the heart of Kojo. Unknown to all, there was a darkness lurking inside him, a bitterness rooted in his past, and a lie whispered into his ears days before the wedding. It was a lie that would soon burn brighter than any flame and shatter everything that began with joy. As the guests danced into the night, unaware of what fate had prepared, only the wind seemed to carry a silent warning. The drums may have been beating for a celebration, but destiny was already setting the stage for heartbreak. And before the first moon of their marriage could fade, this perfect wedding would become the tale that the village of Dabasa would never forget. As the last drum beat faded and the night sky wrapped Dabasa in silence, the joyous wedding celebration came to an end. The villagers returned to their homes, full from the feast and singing praises of the grand union. But inside the marriage hut, where love and peace should have bloomed, something terrifying was about to unfold. Leona sat on the woven mat, her heart fluttering with nervous hope. She had dreamed of this moment, finally being alone with her husband, the strong Prince Kojo. She imagined tender words, gentle hands, and maybe even a soft smile behind his warrior face. But the man who entered the hut was not the man she had hoped for. Kojo pushed open the door with force, his footsteps loud and heavy like thunder. His eyes were sharp, burning with an anger that made the air feel thick. In silence, he tore off his ceremonial headpiece and threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a loud thud, making Leona flinch. She stood up quickly, confused and startled, her eyes wide with fear. "My husband, what is wrong?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. But Kojo didn't answer. Instead, his face twisted with rage, and before she could say another word, his hand flew across her face with a force that knocked her backward. A sharp pain stung her cheek, but what hurt more was the disbelief. She had never imagined that her first night as a wife would begin with violence. Tears filled Leona's eyes, but she didn't cry out. She held her face, breathing heavily, still trying to understand what had just happened. "What have I done, my husband?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kojo's chest rose and fell as he glared at her. "You dare ask me that?" he barked. You think I don't know the truth? You think I would marry a woman with cursed blood? Your mother was a deceiver, and now her daughter thinks she can trap me in shame." Lyona's lips quivered. What truth? What shame? I don't understand. But Kojo didn't listen. His heart had already been poisoned by words whispered in secret, false words planted by someone who envied the union. He had been told that Lyona came from a disgraced bloodline, that her mother was not a respected healer, but a woman who practiced dark charms, and that the child she bore, Lyona, carried the same dangerous spirit. Kojo believed it. He didn't question it. His pride, his fear of dishonor, and his trust in the wrong people blinded him to the woman standing before him, the same woman the village had praised just hours ago. And so, instead of love, Lyona received cruelty. Instead of tenderness, she was greeted with hatred, her dreams shattered like a broken pot, scattered across the cold floor of the marriage hut. Her only crime was loving a man who had already made up his mind to hate her before truly knowing her. That night, while the village slept peacefully, a silent storm raged inside Lyona's heart. She curled up in the corner of the hut, her face bruised, her spirit shaken. Yet even in that moment of pain, she did not curse him. She only whispered to the wind, "May the truth find its way before it's too late." Days passed, but the pain did not fade. Every morning, Lyona rose before the sun, her movements slow, her body sore from the wounds she carried silently. She wrapped her bruises beneath layers of cloth and painted a smile on her face, hiding the suffering that grew deeper with each passing night. To the villagers, she remained the radiant bride, the perfect wife of Prince Kojo, but only the walls of her hut knew the truth, that each night, behind closed doors, she was met with anger, harsh words, and cold hands. Still, she cooked his meals with care, cleaned the home with gentle hands, and greeted Kojo with a soft voice, hoping that perhaps one day something in his heart would shift. But Kojo remained distant and cruel. He never explained his rage, never offered kindness, only silence and storm. And each night, new bruises bloomed on her body like dark flowers, marks of a love that had turned bitter before it could even begin. She kept everything to herself, swallowing her tears so deeply that even the wind could not hear her cries. But pain has a way of showing itself, even when we try to bury it. One afternoon, while washing clothes by the stream, Mama Haliza, the old village washerwoman with eyes as sharp as eagles, noticed something. Lyona rolled up her sleeves, and there, on her delicate arm, a deep purple mark peeked through. Mama Haliza's wrinkled hand paused in the water. She turned and looked at Lyona carefully. "Child," she said softly, "why does the moon kiss your skin with blackness?" Lyona froze for a moment. Her eyes flickered with fear, but then she forced a gentle smile. "Sometimes," she whispered, "love forgets how to be gentle." Mama Haliza said nothing more, but her heart ached as she watched the young bride rinse her garments quietly, her shoulders slightly hunched, her smile fading when she thought no one was looking. Behind that soft voice and calm presence was a woman slowly breaking apart, piece by piece. Each bruise was more than just a mark on her skin. It was a wound on her spirit. But still, Lyona held on, not for glory, not even for love, but for something deeper, something sacred. In her quiet moments, when the world was still and the stars lit the sky, Lyona would close her eyes and hear her mother's voice echo in her heart. Madame Nyara's last words before she passed had been gentle, but powerful. "When fire tests gold, it shines brighter. You are gold, my child." Those words became Lyona's strength. She clung to them like a lifeline, letting them soothe her spirit when her body ached. Though her heart was heavy and her soul bruised, she reminded herself that this pain would not define her. She would endure. She would survive. Even if no one saw her pain, even if Kojo remained lost in his rage, she would carry her mother's spirit within her, and that alone kept her standing. But deep in her heart, a silent question remained. How long could one woman carry such pain before the truth finally broke through the darkness? One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the tall palm trees and the skies turned amber, Lyona decided to clean out the old storage hut behind their compound. Dust danced in the air with every sweep of her broom, and forgotten cobwebs clung to the corners. Her mind was heavy, as always, but cleaning gave her something to do, something to keep her heart from breaking further. As she moved a broken stool aside, her broom struck an old clay jar tucked beneath a pile of faded mats. The jar wobbled and rolled slightly. Curious, Lyona knelt down and lifted the lid. Inside, Wrapped in a piece of aged cloth was a sealed envelope, her breath caught in her throat. The handwriting on the front made her heart skip a beat. It was her mother's. Her fingers trembled as she gently opened the seal. The paper had yellowed with time, but the words were still clear, written with love and urgency. She began to read. "My beloved daughter, if you find this, it means fate has begun to shake your path. There is a truth you do not know, a secret about your birth that the village elders swore to hide. You are not just my child, you are also the daughter of the late King Boma of the Dahala Kingdom. You were hidden for your safety after the royal massacre. You are a queen by blood." Leona's hands began to shake. The letter slipped from her grip and floated gently to the floor. Her eyes widened in disbelief as her mind tried to make sense of the words. She stared ahead, her heart pounding like a drum. A queen by blood, the daughter of a king. She sank to her knees, tears flooding her eyes. Not from pain this time, but from shock, confusion, and the weight of a truth she had never imagined. All her life she thought she was just the daughter of a simple village healer. But now she knew. Her blood carried royalty. Her life had been a secret woven in silence to protect her from death. And suddenly, Kojo's words on their wedding night echoed in her ears again. "You and your mother's filthy bloodline will not ruin my house." Now it all made sense. But it was all twisted. Kojo had believed a lie, a cruel lie, meant to turn his heart against her. He didn't know the truth, and neither did she until now. Her mother had kept this secret buried, not out of shame, but out of love, to protect her from those who had killed her father, to keep her hidden from enemies that still might seek her life. But now that secret had surfaced, and it changed everything. Leona clutched the letter close to her chest, her tears flowing freely now. So much pain, so many bruises, all because of a lie. But now she held the truth in her hands, the truth that could destroy everything or set her free. And deep within her, a new strength began to rise. The fire inside her had not gone out. It had only been waiting for the wind of truth to fan its flames. Elsewhere in the quiet of the compound, Kojo sat alone beneath the fading light of the evening sky. His fingers traced the blade of the sword that lay across his lap, a sword given to him by his late uncle, a man he admired more than anyone else. But the weight of the metal was nothing compared to the weight in his heart. His mind was restless, tormented by memories he had buried for years but could never truly escape. Kojo had grown up under the rule of his father, Chief Endero, a man of power but little warmth. Discipline was heavy in that house, and love was scarce. But the most painful part of Kojo's childhood wasn't the harsh rules or the cold words. It was the image of his mother, Yameta, broken in spirit. As a boy, Kojo had often hidden behind the wooden door of their hut, watching silently as his gentle mother was insulted, humiliated, and once even struck by a healer, one who belonged to the same clan as Leona's mother. The pain from those days ran deep, like roots tangled in his soul. He never forgot the tears in his mother's eyes, or the way her voice trembled when she begged for peace. That healer had left scars not just on Yameta, but on Kojo's heart, carving a space where bitterness and anger grew over the years. To him, every mention of that healer's clan stirred those buried emotions. So, when an old village elder, a man Kojo had trusted since childhood, leaned in one day and whispered, "The girl you marry carries the same blood as the one who broke your mother," something inside Kojo snapped. The elder's voice was calm but sharp, planting a seed of suspicion and rage. "They sent her to destroy you, just like her kind destroyed your mother," the elder said. Kojo's heart turned cold. He didn't question it. He didn't ask Leona for the truth. He didn't even try to see her for who she truly was. All he saw was the ghost of a past enemy standing in front of him in a new face, Leona's face. His mind twisted reality. He believed he was protecting himself, protecting his home, from another heartbreak, another betrayal. But what he didn't realize was that his hatred wasn't meant for Leona. It was meant for a wound that had never healed, a wound from his childhood, a wound he had never spoken of, but one that silently ruled his actions. And the greatest tragedy of all was that he didn't know the full truth. He didn't know that Leona was not just the daughter of a healer, but the hidden daughter of a king. He didn't know he had been lied to, misled by a bitter elder who had his own reasons for spreading poison. So, while Leona wept in silence and bore his anger with grace, Kojo sat in his own silent prison, chained by memories and blinded by pain. He thought he was fighting a battle from his past, but in reality, He was destroying his present and hurting the only woman who could have truly healed him. One early morning, the sun had barely touched the rooftops when the news spread like wildfire. Leona was gone. Her sleeping mat was empty, her clothes no longer hanging by the wooden rack, and the beaded necklace she always wore was left neatly on the stool beside her bedside mat. There was no letter, no farewell, no single clue to where she had gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The servants whispered in confusion. The villagers murmured in disbelief. Even Mama Haliza shook her head in sorrow, saying, "That girl carried pain behind her smile. Maybe the wind has taken her to peace." But inside the royal compound, chaos brewed. Kojo sat still when the news was delivered to him. At first, he clenched his jaw and waved off the worry with pride. "She is just being dramatic," he said coldly. "She'll return when her pride settles." But deep inside, something cracked. Every corner of his soul itched with guilt. The bruises he had left, the harsh words he had thrown, the truth he never cared to hear. His heart beat faster with a haunting thought. What if something terrible happened to her? What if she was lost forever because of me? He walked around the hut aimlessly, staring at her leftover beads, holding them in his hand, like they were the last thread connecting him to her. But he still didn't say it aloud. He was too proud to show fear, too proud to admit he missed her. What Kojo didn't know was that Leona had not run away from pain. She had walked toward the truth, carrying nothing but her mother's letter and the necklace of her late healer mother. Leona had journeyed in secret across rivers, dusty roads, and thick forests until she reached the land of Dahala, a forgotten kingdom whose ruins still whispered the history of royalty. There, she found Elder Kafu, the last surviving royal advisor, a man with a long white beard and eyes that still held fire from the old days. Elder Kafu welcomed her with a trembling heart and tears in his eyes. When Leona showed him the letter, he did not speak for a while. He simply stared at her, her face, her posture, her spirit, and then he nodded slowly and said, "Your mother protected you well, Princess Nia Leona Dahala. I see her strength in your eyes." Leona's heart raced. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but instead, she stood in silence, processing the truth. She was not a peasant's daughter. She was royalty, the only surviving heir of the fallen Dahala kingdom, a lost queen whose blood carried a legacy no one could erase. But Leona did not want revenge. She did not want power or to return with a crown. All she wanted was understanding, to know who she truly was, to heal from the wounds she carried not just on her skin, but deep within her spirit. She had been broken, yes, but not defeated. As she stood at the cliffside overlooking the ruins of her ancestral palace, a soft wind kissed her cheeks, and she whispered, "I am not a mistake. I was born for something greater." And while Kojo tossed and turned in his empty hut, struggling with regret and confusion, Leona had already begun the journey to rediscover herself, not as a broken wife, but as a woman rising from ashes, stronger than ever. Back in Dabasa, the once proud walls of Kojo's compound felt colder than ever. The silence in Leona's absence grew louder each day, echoing through every corner of his heart. Unable to bear the weight of not knowing where she had gone, or why she left, Kojo found himself drawn to her room, her scent still lingering in the air, her woven mat still neatly folded, and the stool where she used to sit still placed beside the window. As he sank to the floor, his eyes caught a small corner of paper sticking out beneath the edge of the mat. He hesitated for a moment, then reached for it. It was an envelope, old and delicate. His fingers trembled as he opened it, not knowing that the words inside would shatter everything he thought he knew. His eyes scanned the letter. His breath slowed. Each sentence struck him like a heavy stone. His vision blurred with tears as the truth unfolded before him. Leona was not just the daughter of a healer. She was the daughter of the late King Boma of Dahala, a royal by blood, the true heir to a fallen throne, a princess hidden to protect her life after the brutal royal massacre. His hands shook as he reread the lines again and again, hoping it was a mistake, but it wasn't. She's royal? He whispered to himself. She was never a deceiver. She's a queen. His legs gave way beneath him, and he collapsed to the ground. The weight of guilt crashed down on him like a thunderstorm. All this time, he had believed the poisonous lies of the elder. All this time, he had treated her like filth, blamed her for a pain she never caused. He had raised his hand against a woman of honor, of dignity, of pure heart. Kojo buried his face in his hands, tears streaming uncontrollably. He remembered her silent eyes, her soft voice, the way she smiled through pain, the way she served him meals even when her hands were bruised. She never shouted, she never cursed him. She had loved him, even when he gave her no reason to. And now she was gone, not because of hatred, but because of truth. Truth she had every right to seek, but he never cared to listen to. His heart, once filled with pride and anger, now ached with deep sorrow. For the first time in his life, the fierce warrior prince cried like a lost boy, not because he lost a wife, but because he lost a queen who had only given him love and received cruelty in return. Kojo whispered her name over and over, like a prayer he hoped the wind would carry to her ears. Lyona, Lyona, forgive me. But forgiveness was not something that came easily, not after wounds so deep, not after trust so broken. And in that moment, Kojo realized the most painful truth of all. Sometimes, when you realize someone's true worth, it's already too late. Kojo was no longer the proud prince the villagers once admired. He became a shadow of himself. Each sunrise found him sitting alone beneath the great baobab tree, his eyes hollow, his clothes torn, his hair unkempt. He barely spoke to anyone. He refused food, turned away water, and shunned his own reflection. The once mighty warrior who had led battles and inspired songs now wandered the compound barefoot, whispering to himself like a madman. The whispers in the village grew louder. The prince has lost his mind, they said. He is cursed. Mothers pulled their children away when he passed. Elders shook their heads in sorrow. No one truly understood the depth of his pain, but the madness in his eyes told a story that needed no words. Kojo's soul was drowning in guilt. The letter he had found, the truth about Lyona's royal blood, haunted him day and night. Every moment he replayed the past, the slaps, the shouting, the cold silence he had shown her. He remembered her swollen cheek, the tears she tried to hide, the bruises she covered with her shawl. He remembered her soft voice, her gentle hands, her kind heart, and how he had crushed it all. He could still hear her laugh sometimes, like a ghost echoing in his ears. He imagined her sitting by the fire, weaving mats or humming to the birds, but each time he blinked, her image vanished, leaving him in a pit of regret. Under the baobab tree, Kojo would talk to the wind every night, as if it could carry his words to wherever Lyona had gone. Lyona, forgive me, he would whisper. I didn't know. I was blind. I was broken. But you didn't deserve my pain. His voice would crack, tears rolling down his face. You were royalty, and I treated you like dust. You gave me love, and I gave you scars. But the wind gave no answers, only silence, only the rustle of leaves and the ache of his own soul. His palace became empty. He locked his chambers and slept on the ground under the stars. His meals remained untouched. Even the servants wept for him in secret, watching the once fierce prince wither like a dying tree. Some nights, he screamed into the sky, calling her name, begging the spirits to bring her back, but no one came. Only owls watched from afar, as if mourning with him. The sword gifted by his late uncle remained buried in the sand beside the baobab tree. He could no longer bear to hold it. His hands, once proud and strong, now trembled with shame. Every corner of the compound reminded him of her, the garden she watered, the seat she sat on, the kitchen where she cooked his meals. Even with bruises on her arms, it all stabbed at his heart. Kojo was not just grieving her absence. He was haunted by the weight of his own cruelty. The guilt consumed him slowly, tearing away his strength, eating his pride, and drowning his soul in regret. And as each day passed, he realized one painful truth. He had not just lost a wife, he had lost the only light that could have healed his darkness. The whispers in the village had turned into loud concerns. Everyone had seen the prince losing his mind, talking to the wind, refusing food, and wandering like a broken soul. The village elders could no longer ignore it. They gathered in the meeting hut, faces heavy with worry and questions. The proud chief Endoro tried to silence them, pretending everything was fine, but even he couldn't hide the truth anymore. The people demanded answers. Why was their prince suffering? What had truly happened to his wife? And then, one fateful morning, everything changed. A royal horn blew at the entrance of Dabasa village. Villagers rushed out of their homes, eyes wide with curiosity. And there she stood, Lyona. But not the same Lyona they once knew. She was no longer the quiet girl who walked with her head low. She stood tall, dressed in the elegant royal robes of the Dahala kingdom, her presence glowing with dignity and strength. A royal pendant sparkled on her neck, and her steps carried the grace of a true queen. The entire village froze. Mouths hung open. The air itself held its breath. "She is royalty," someone whispered. "She was always a queen," said another. Even the elders stood up in disbelief, their heads slowly bowing in respect. For the first time in his life, Chief Endoro trembled. He had wronged a royal bloodline. He had allowed cruelty in his own home. He looked down in shame, unable to meet Leona's eyes. But Leona's heart was not filled with bitterness. She had returned not to take revenge, but to bring truth and healing. She walked calmly into the village square and spoke gently yet firmly. "Let the truth cleanse this land, not with fire, not with war, but with wisdom." Her words fell like rain on dry soil. The villagers stood silent, feeling the weight of her grace. She didn't accuse. She didn't shout. Her strength was in her calm. Her power was in her peace. Kojo, who had been sitting under the baobab tree, heard the commotion and staggered toward the crowd. When his eyes saw her, his knees buckled. The woman he had hurt, the woman he had failed, was standing before him, glowing like the sunrise. He dropped to his knees in the dust and began to cry like a child. His voice shook as he spoke. "Forgive me. I was blind. I was lost." Leona looked at him, and for a moment her eyes softened. "I forgave you long before I left," she said quietly. "Not because you deserved it, but because I needed to heal." Kojo reached out, hoping she would stay. But Leona took a step back and said, "But I cannot stay where love is bruised by fists. A home should not be a place of fear. A queen must rise where she is honored, not wounded." Her words broke the hearts of many. Tears flowed among the crowd. Even the strongest warriors looked away, ashamed. Leona turned and walked away, not in anger, but in dignity. And with each step, she reminded the village of something powerful. Strength is not in how loud you shout, but how gracefully you rise after pain. Kojo stood before the village council, his head bowed, his heart heavy. The elders, with sorrow in their eyes, delivered their judgment. He would not be punished with chains or prison, but with something far heavier, exile. He was told to leave Dabasa, to wander and reflect, to carry the weight of his mistakes on his shoulders. It wasn't revenge. It was a lesson, one that life itself would teach him. So, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a haunted look in his eyes, Kojo left. The same man who once walked with pride now limped with guilt. His footsteps faded into the horizon, swallowed by the dust of shame. Meanwhile, Leona returned to the ancient ruins of Dahala, the land of her blood, the soil where her ancestors once reigned. With determination in her spirit and wisdom in her heart, she began to rebuild, not just the kingdom, but its soul. The people who had scattered after the royal massacre returned, drawn by her light. Slowly, Dahala breathed again. Its markets came alive, the laughter of children returned, and the royal palace rose stone by stone. But most importantly, a new queen now ruled, not with fear, but with grace. Leona was crowned Queen near Leona Dahala, and her name echoed beyond borders. Her story spread from village to village, of the young bride who suffered in silence, who carried her pain with dignity, and who rose like the sun after the darkest night. Women whispered her name with pride. They drew strength from her courage. Men spoke of her honor with respect, and even elders who had once doubted her now taught their daughters her story. But karma, as it always does, completed its circle. Kojo, now a wanderer, traveled from one village to another. He no longer called himself a prince. His eyes, once sharp with pride, were now clouded with regret. In each village, he shared his story, not to earn sympathy, but to teach. He sat by firesides, telling young boys, "Do not raise your hands in anger. A strong man protects, not destroys." He spoke of the queen he once had, the love he didn't understand, and the pain he could never undo. His tale became a warning, a mirror for men to see their flaws before it was too late. And so, across the lands, the tale lived on. The story of a prince who hurt a queen, and a queen who forgave but chose freedom over fear. A story not of revenge, but of rising, not of hate, but healing. Because in the end, the world remembered not Kojo's fists, but Leona's forgiveness. Not the wounds she carried, but the throne she earned. And her voice, soft but powerful, became a symbol for all. That real strength is not in fists or weapons, but in rising after being broken, and choosing kindness where bitterness could have lived. If this story touched your heart, if Leona's strength and forgiveness made your eyes tear up, then don't let it end here. Let her story reach someone who needs hope, who needs healing, who needs to believe that pain does not define.
Sangi हाल वे ठीक है करूं वडेरे दडे हाल तगड़ी है
ठीक है
घर वाले बहनी दे सारे ठीक है तू ही कहता कर सांगे वीडियो अपने एडवांस शेड्यूल की है चलो एक रात घर गुजारी है कौन ही मसला
मेरे को नहीं इतना थी ना वीडियो मेरे को नहीं आ रहे
दो वीडियो एक चैनल लेना 4 वीडियो तक बनाने में पोसा नहीं करें तू ना बना सकता एक रात में मैं तो वैसे तेरे पर आदा पिया भी वैसे ये बंदा तू बात बजाना ते हमना सफर देख सारा बाकी साकू के राज सारी जानते के राज सारे वैसे चलो भाई कार शहर बंदा रहे अंदर सारा तब भी ऐसा है ना घर वाले बस यही सारा घर है तो पीछे घर है तो वतन वेव शो की वीडियो वायरल थी है वीडियो की भाई वायरल थी है अल्लाह खैर करे से तो सबर आज नहीं आया हमने हासिल ये हमारा ऑफिस है मेरी वीडियो बन रही है क्योंकि मैंने स्टोरी वाली वीडियो पे लगाना है अपने मोबाइल से वीडियो बना रहा हूँ